Shortly before 2 o'clock this afternoon, a Tennessee Highway Patrol trooper was traveling northbound on I-65 when he saw a man sitting on the guardrail on the shoulder of the interstate. The trooper stopped to see what was going on with the pedestrian and ultimately had the goal of getting the guy off the interstate, trying to give him a ride away from the shoulder. The trooper engaged in a conversation with the individual, actually learned his name, and as they were very close to the state trooper's car, the individual kind of pushed away from the trooper and produced a box cutter, pulled the box cutter. The trooper called Metro Police for assistance, and as Metro officers were coming to assist the trooper, a member of the Mount Juliet Police Department, off duty, who was traveling northbound on I-65, saw what was taking place and stopped. The trooper and the Mount Juliet officer engaged in dialogue with the man, trying to de-escalate the situation. Actually, that took place for about 30 minutes. Constant communication, talking to the individual, trying to de-escalate, trying to get him to surrender, go with them to get off the interstate. The man was holding a box cutter in his left hand, his right hand was in his pocket. Metro officers arrived after about 10 minutes or so as this dialogue continued, being led by the Mount Juliet officer. At around 2:30, some 30 minutes into it, as the officers are continuing to talk to him, suddenly he pulled his right hand out of his pocket, holding a shiny silver cylindrical object. The officers, not knowing what that was, and given his very abrupt movement, kind of aiming something toward the officers fired. A total of 9 law enforcement personnel fired on the individual, 6 Metro Police, 2 THP, and the Mount Juliet officer. The individual was taken to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation will be conducting the full investigation into the officer-involved shooting in this situation.
How long did this last from beginning to end?
Metro Police received the call for assistance from the THP at 1:55, so it was shortly before 2 o'clock when the troopers saw the man sitting on the guardrail of I-65 North, right across the median there.
What was that silver object?
Well, I don't know yet what that silver object was. It was not a firearm. Understand that several Metro officers had formed a perimeter trying to assist. As the dialogue continued, the dialogue with the Mount Juliet officer was to de-escalate the situation, have the man understand that they wanted to help him, just get him off the interstate. The box cutter remained in his left hand, and that right hand was in the pocket. The officers obviously did not know what could have been in that right hand pocket, and it was about 30 minutes into it when he abruptly pulled his hand out of his pocket and directing it, outstretching his arm toward law enforcement personnel, and they saw that shiny object, again not knowing what it was, and they fired.
Can you tell us his name?
We don't have his name to release at this point, pending next of kin notification. He is a 37-year-old local individual.
Is this individual known to
Say again?
Is this individual known to Metro Police or any of these agencies before today?
He has been arrested in the past by Metro Police, yes.
And can you speak to the fact that this took place in the middle of the interstate? There were lines of cars, of onlookers, bystanders. I imagine that that's unusual for a standoff situation. Can you just speak to that aspect of it, that several people witnessed this?
Well, the circumstances of this are unusual. A man sitting on the guardrail of the interstate and a trooper stops to offer assistance. That was the reason for the law enforcement contact with the man. The state trooper wanted to help him, give him a ride off the interstate for his own safety. We all know the pedestrians on the interstate are very hazardous to both motorists and themselves. And through the conversation, I think the trooper believed that this was going to be okay. And it was the pushing away from the trooper and then the producing of the box cutter that escalated it up to a greater law enforcement response. The Mount Juliet officer who was in traffic saw some of this and went to assist. And you're right, there were a lot of people on the interstate at that time of day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon who were traveling both northbound and southbound. Northbound traffic stopped, and southbound traffic had to be stopped for a while as well.
Did you guys try a taser or a non-lethal weapon before firing?
There was no tasers were deployed. As far as discharging, a officer did have a taser on standby, but in the situation, once the shiny metal object or the shiny cylindrical object was seen, the officers fired, again, not knowing what that was, and they were firing in defense of themselves, not knowing what potential threat could have been in that right hand as it quickly emerged out of the pocket.
Our station has counted 36 shots. Is that accurate?
I don't know.
And in conversations with this man, was he giving any sort of the ideations of self-harm, anything like? I mean, do we know anything about his intentions?
No, the Mount Juliet officer had the bulk of the conversation with him, and he's going to be interviewed, obviously, by the TBI to get the full extent of what the context of the conversation was. I know some of our officers were unable to hear because of, obviously, all the traffic noise that you're hearing now.
Does he live around here? Did he say how long he had been walking up the interstate? Or?
I don't know that. I know he's a local man. I'm not sure where he was living at the moment. We'll be finding out more about him as the time goes on.
Is there body camera footage of the?
There is. From Metro Police, there is.
Will that be released later?
Yes, as we typically do. Okay?
Thank you, Don.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I had Bill Miller and Tyler Chandler here, both THP and Mount Juliet, in case you all have any questions for them.
Can you talk to us about the Mount Juliet officer that spoke to the individual at all?
Very brief, no details in that conversation. I can answer a few questions.
Okay.
Y'all ready to go? Yep. As many of you know, with what Dawn released, our police officer was off duty and traveling back to our city from Franklin with his family. He noticed the THP trooper in an altercation and immediately stopped his vehicle to help this trooper with whatever situation that trooper had. Obviously, he saw exactly what Metro Nashville released. His family in the vehicle then started to call 911, trying to get them more help with what they were dealing with in the altercation. And it continued to work through that over a long period of time as our officer and the trooper are engaging with this individual, working to de-escalate, working to bring calmness to the situation in the middle of the interstate. And that continued over a long period of time. Obviously, more officers showed up to assist them, and then you have those details as Metro released.
Did the suspect appear to be under the influence of anything?
All of those details are part of this investigation. Thankfully, there is a lot of body-worn camera video. Our officer did not have that simply because he's off duty, and that's not something they carry with them. But Metro Nashville, and I believe the Highway Patrol, does have video of this incident. So as they do the investigation, we will get more details of this. But as you can imagine, a lot of people on this interstate saw this interaction take place. Our officer's family saw this interaction take place, and our officers had to go through what is a very traumatic incident. There's not a police officer out there that wants to be in this situation. It's a very traumatic for them, but also everyone that watched this, and the man's family. Our prayers and our hearts go out to everyone involved in this, and that's why we are working on a different track, working with our officers involved to ensure that they receive the care that they need by going through this incident today. But we are here to work with Metro Nashville, the Highway Patrol, and the TBI through this investigation, and we're going to do it as greatly as we can to help them with the investigation.
Tyler, you mentioned his family was in the car. Does that include children?
I don't want to get into too much detail with that, simply because they are all affected with this, and they do need some privacy for a period of time until we can release that information.
And that's sort of why I was asking, can you speak to the additional emotional duress on an officer who has to engage in a situation where they're
The officer is very upset his family had to see this interaction. Very upset. And we're going to do everything we can to take care of that officer and also his family.
Can I just get your first and last name and position?
My first name is Tyler, Tyler. Last name Chandler, Chandler.